I should be. There we go. All right, well, good afternoon, good morning from wherever you are attending this meeting from. My name is Chris Battisto, and I want to formally introduce myself today and speak with you all today as the new chair of the IT&I Committee here at ESIP. This is part of our monthly webinar series. We have a webinar once every month, and we have a schedule on the ESIP community calendar. This is consistently being updated, and I will give information later in the presentation today if you wish to maybe speak at one of these webinars. But I look forward to hosting these webinars for the time being. So let me go ahead and get into the bulk of what I would like to share with you all today. So I'm wanting to talk about the user needs team at NASA Justice, which is where I currently work. And I want to talk about how we can bridge some user needs gaps, some issues that we're running into, ways that we reach out and collaborate with our broad user base, and how we can introduce users to various new technologies and interoperability. And I think that for anybody involved in geospatial data, we understand that right now there are a lot of different paradigms that are shifting. One of the biggest is the cloud. This is arguably our biggest project for the next decade here at GESDISC and for the larger part of NASA Earth Data. I'll get more into that later, but I'm looking forward to talking to you about this today. So just a little bit more about me. I'm actually a Illinoisan. I'm kind of the resident Midwesterner at our current data center. I grew up in Carroll Stream, which is just in a suburb outside of Chicago, Illinois. And I went to College of DuPage, which is, in my opinion, one of the best community colleges in the United States. I had originally wanted to be a commercial pilot when I grew up, but I had always been interested in technology, specifically building computers. This is something that I still engage with today. And particularly using the hardware that we already have is something that I've always been interested in. For example, something that I have engaged in with the past is building Hackintoshes, where you essentially install Mac OS on non-Apple hardware, which is pretty cool stuff, in my opinion, and something that has kind of carried some of those passions leaning into software. I had always grown up with a fear of severe weather. In northern Illinois, we get pretty much everything. We get blizzards in the winter. We get polar vortices where the temperatures drop down well below 0 degrees Fahrenheit. But in the spring and the summer, we're known to get some tornadoes in some particularly populated areas. And so I had always been anxious about this. But as I went through my associates at community college, just trying to figure out what I wanted to do, I fell in love with the weather classes that they offer. Some of you who might be involved in meteorology here might be familiar with College of DuPage's NextLab website, which is one of the best free forecasting websites available to the world, pretty much. And so that has kind of blossomed into my later career. In my undergrad and master's degree, I went to Northern Illinois University, which is also in Northern Illinois, just about an hour west of Carroll Stream, where I finished my bachelor's in meteorology and finally pursued a master's degree in geography, but it was about climate change and future storms. And this has kind of brought me to where I am today here at NASA Justice. So right now, I'm currently working at the Goddard Earth Sciences Data Information Services Center. I'll get a little bit more into what we are involved with there if you're not familiar. But I was hired just coming up to 3 years ago, and I am a remote worker on the user needs team, alongside a couple of other folks who also, one of them works remotely, the other works out in Greenbelt. That's where the Goddard Space Flight Center is, which is the main office for the GESDISC. And so currently I'm living in St. Louis doing remote work. And so aside from traveling all over to various conferences, user working groups, you could find me in my free time fixing up my pinball machine that I recently picked up, playing in tournaments. I'm still a Chicago sports fan at heart. I can't seem to flip the switch with a lot of the rival teams that are down here in St. Louis, but fortunately St. Louis has been great. And you can also find me biking and running in beautiful Tower Grove Park, which I live just right by. Something I want to really quickly mention as well, I see Sharif just put a link for the sign-in sheet in the chat. Please go ahead and visit that link. And then, of course, I do have a second screen, so if any hands get raised or anybody has any messages in the chat, I will be able to see it. So feel free to just post anything, any questions you have in the chat. So now getting into what we do here at the Goddard Earth Sciences Data Information and Services Center. This is based out in Greenbelt, Maryland, and we are one of 12 distributed access archive centers across the, not just the continental United States, but also in Alaska. And so this is part of the NASA Earth Data Sphere, where basically everything related to Earth observation. So basically NASA things related to things pointing towards us and not away from us are all curated and processed with lots of research being done at all these different DACs, or distributed access archive centers. GESDISC is one of the larger ones. We house over 3,000 collections, which are basically covering all sorts of different missions relating to various satellites, with collections that hold over 3.4 petabytes and set to grow over the next decade or so. We also host a couple of different products that are publicly available. One of them is NASA Giovanni, which is a tool that you can use to create different visualizations and animations without having any sort of programming experience. We have a screenshot here on the right, on the top, of one of our products, which is a global precipitation measurement that you can make for free using Giovanni. Something else as well is I have a lot of links in this presentation, and I will link this slide deck in the chat afterwards. That way, if anybody comes in a little bit late, they'll still have access to the slides, and feel free to visit any of these links. We have a website which you can learn about all the different collections that we have. Each collection has a dataset landing page, and we have various tools and documentation used for accessing some of the data. One of them is our level 3 and 4 regritter tool. Again, this is another free tool that you can use. We also have tools involved with the Esri Sphere, so that involves the ArcGIS image service, which we currently have for the global precipitation measurement collection. Additionally, we like to showcase the data that we curate using news articles, data and action articles, of course, aside from other presentations. And so we always are making these different articles and presenting them both in-house and at various conferences and seminars. Something that I am involved with, along with my user needs team, is how-tos. We currently have over 100 how-tos on our website. A lot of them are relating to data access. A few of them are relating to use cases, but something that we've been adding a lot have been Jupyter notebooks, which is involved with Python processing for the data. And so we currently are always coming up with different how-tos with different products and services. And we're also engaging in user feedback in order to make these how-tos more efficient and easy to learn. And we also have a user help desk, which is something that I also monitor myself, and we also monitor the NASA Earth Data Forum for any questions that come up. Something else as well is that we are currently migrating our data to the Earth Data Cloud. And so I'll get into a little bit more detail about this later. But this is something that made this committee quite interesting to me, is because right now, we traditionally host all of our data on premises or on-prem. So you would download our data from a box that's sitting right now at the Goddard Space Flight Center. But we're currently in the process of migrating this to the AWS cloud. And what that'll allow us to do is hold these collections that are growing in size over the next decade or so. But it'll also allow for users to scale out their processing, use the cloud without having to have any sort of hardware locally. But more importantly, we're trying to figure out how to make these things more interoperable with each other. And so something that we're really focused on right now is hybridization, figuring out workflows, and engaging with the public through various channels to do this. Something else that is really important to us that is part of engaging in communities like ESIP or using open source tools is part of the SPD 41A goals that NASA set out a couple of years ago, which basically outlines our dedication to making our data open, accessible, with high quality, and using tools that are free to access, not just for folks in the United States, but globally. We also currently have a program called TOPS, which is Transformation to Open Science. And so you can become certified in this program. Basically, this is all about, again, making sure that if curation staff or researchers come out with new research or products using our data, we want to make sure that it's accessible to everyone. And part of that is becoming something called FAIR compliant, which is making sure that our data and our tools and also our how-tos are findable, accessible, interoperable, and reproducible. So this diagram on the right here is something taken from the NASA website, which kind of ties it all together. A little bit more about my work on the user needs team. Right now, what myself and my user needs team does is we basically work with various curation staff and engineering at our data center. And let's say a new service comes out, which requires documentation or how to, we will generally work with them to make the documentation, but to also give them feedback. Sometimes the services might not be the most user-friendly. And so something that's really important to us is making sure that these products can be accessed easily, that they're consistent, and making sure that they fit in with the goals of some of our other documentation and our how-tos. Something else that we do is we monitor the help desk, and the Earth Data Forum. Generally, we get a lot of queries, user queries related to data access issues, typically having to do with Python data access. But fortunately, something that we run into is a lot of user queries related to potential just finding the data. Basically, we have thousands of collections and even more variables. And something else that we attempt to do is help the user find the data that we need. So we have over 100 of these how-tos, and we're constantly publishing them, making Jupyter notebooks out of them. But something we're also doing is getting this work citable. So we've published our how-tos, specifically the Jupyter notebook how-tos on Zenodo that you can see on the left. But we're also using tools like GitHub. And so we have a GitHub repository that houses all the Jupyter notebooks, and they all contain links that embed a rendering of them on our website. So if you wish to just find them on our website alongside the data and the data access documentation, you can feel free to do that. Or if you're typically working with GitHub and you're familiar with GitHub repositories, we have the ability for you to interact with that as well. Not only that, but we're trying to make things a little more transparent. So we have the issues tab that I have a screenshot of on the left, and these all involve different things that we're working on, maybe some bugs that have come up, but this is open for anyone pretty much to comment on. And if you wish to collaborate, we also allow that as well. We had our first collaboration from someone who was at a different data center just last year, and they were able to use GitHub to get that done real quick and real easily with a high degree of precision and quality control. And so I encourage you all to engage with us. If you have a bug or suggestion, please use this issue tab. Additionally, that cross-staff collaboration and user outreach is an increasingly important focus in our user needs team. So we engage with numerous channels. We network all over the place across various agencies, academia, not so much private industry, but certainly we know that we have a lot of users with different sorts of goals, and we want to make sure that we don't silo ourselves, that the documentation we create is something that can easily be reproduced. And so to do that, we're part of groups like OpenScapes, which is a group comprised of folks from all over NASA. There's another part of OpenScapes that's not just for NASA folks, but part of that is a mentoring group. And so basically, myself and a few other of my colleagues are currently mentors in this OpenScapes group, and we meet up on a semi-regular basis to basically create new documentation, user um, uh, I'm losing the vocabulary for some reason, but basically analysis cases, using each other's data and using the cloud to do this, and also trying to break down the barriers that are associated with the cloud, coming up with ways to create documentation that is more understandable for everyone, and really fostering this environment where asking questions is okay, and attempting to really get across these barriers, make sure that people aren't necessarily dependent on any sort of compute that we are required, making sure that they can fledge out, that they can do all the work that they need once they've learned it from OpenScapes is another huge focus. And so I'm really honored to be a part of that group. And then, of course, we also attend various conferences and webinars, whether that be AGU, ESIP, SciPy, the ESRI conference. We also have a user working group and NASA Earth Data webinars that are also posted on a regular basis. Our user working group is, of course, closed to the public, but it's comprised of lots of folks from academia and other agencies who use our data and have suggestions, and we meet with them on another semi-regular basis to get that feedback. And that goes directly into the products that my team creates. So working with the service providers and the users is a huge emphasis and is something that is really important when it comes to interoperability and introducing new technologies, especially as we are evolving over this cloud paradigm. And so this is something that I'm really excited to really continue to foster with the IT&I Committee. We have on the left is a picture of our user working group that we have every year in person, where we invite the users of our data to actually come and talk to us and give us live feedback and suggestions. On the bottom is a picture of myself with Arika Viraponce of OpenDAP. And so OpenDAP is a tool used to connect data and subsetting services with users using internet protocols. And so in order to make this a little bit more accessible and interoperable with our data and our users, we went up and just collaborated with them, with the actual service providers. And we were able to make posters, and we've even helped them out with workshops. That's another really important aspect and something that I want to focus on. And then, of course, we do workshops at some of these conferences. On the right is a picture of myself with a few other of my colleagues, and as well folks from our headquarters and then from other data centers, where we walked through all of our various services with a small group, worked with them one-on-one to help get them familiarized with not just our data and our holdings and our services, but even a little bit of Python. So this is something that we will continue to do, and I'm looking forward to sharing any more of these opportunities with this committee. Getting a little bit more into this current paradigm shift, and this is something I want to bring up because it was a really big topic at the ESIP conference this year. We're currently migrating our data to the AWS cloud. We know that the AWS cloud is not the only cloud service that there is. There's also Microsoft Azure, there's also Google Earth Engine. There's a lot of different options. At NASA Earth Data, we went with the AWS cloud. But we also went with a single region, which basically means that instead of the data being kind of in different pieces all around the world at various data centers, it's centralized to a few data centers in a specific region. What that means is that if you wish to compute next to the data, you must be in that region. The benefit of computing next to the data is that you can, of computing next to cloud data, is that because they aren't limited by just single servers, they can scale out, they can work with different tools, and they provide a reliable storage source. This also includes various cloud-optimized storage formats, such as ZAR, cloud-optimized GeoTIFF, for example. Right now, we're really trying to focus on ZAR. Some of you might be familiar with data formats like HDF and NetCDF. A few of the talks at the ESIP meeting a few weeks ago were about how to make these data formats faster and more efficient in the cloud. And so although my team isn't necessarily involved with the actual nitty-gritty engineering, what we do is produce a lot of resources to try to get that boiled down to what is necessary for our users to know. And that's really important. That helps not just increase the usability of our data, but it also gets people involved with new technologies that are coming out and really making sure that they are on board with what's happening. And so on the right, you can see we have linked on our homepage our migrating to the cloud document, which basically outlines different how-tos, why we're migrating to the cloud, different terminologies, and we've spent a lot of time refining this. And we've also included things like videos, which this video that I've embedded here on the right is basically just a description of what it means to compute data inside of the cloud from the NASA perspective. So I invite you all to check out this video when we're done here. And then finally, something else is to make sure that we communicate that you don't have to be inside of AWS, you don't have to have an AWS account just to compute cloud data and use cloud resources. Some of you may know that certain ways of accessing the data or the services or the compute require money out of your pocket. But fortunately, we have methods such as HTTPS endpoints that allow you to pull data directly from the cloud, or OpenDAP, which allows you to perform subsetting using links and open the data with a wide variety of tools, which provide this hybrid access solution, this interoperable solution that we're really going to try to focus on in the user needs team going forward. And as a result, we are constantly adding new tutorials and documentation, given the feedback of what is most important. And so it's playing. And yes, I did narrate that video. For testing out some of these tools, we use groups like OpenScapes to create the documentation and to share what we've learned with the public. So unfortunately, we don't currently have a public cloud playground hosted by NASA. We also don't provide documentation on how to set up your own AWS cloud account, but we do have a lot of different documentation, and how-tos, assuming that you've gotten past that point, which is really important. And so this is something that we typically show or use in our in-house demos. On the left is an example of the collaboration that we've done with OpenScapes and other DACs to create this documentation, which is the Earth Data Cloud Cookbook. I've included a link to that there, which includes lots of different resources to help you understand things like cost planning, schedules of different workshops and hackathons, some of the documentation or the projects that have been produced out of that effort, and also kind of just helping you understand what it means to compute data in the cloud. Should I even compute my analysis in the cloud? This when to cloud thing is something that we're also working on, which is really important. And on the right side is the space that we use to create some of these documentation, assuming that the user is already at this point. This is on the right, 2 screenshots of the 2i2c Jupyter Hub. This is basically a Jupyter Hub server, which is used to create living documents of Python code. But Jupyter Hub is something that can run pretty much anywhere, even locally on your desktop. Here, it's running next to that data in US West 2. And we've also have the opportunity for you to put your own image inside of this Jupyter Hub to experiment. And so we've been working as well with groups like some folks from the NSIDC, the National Snow and Ice Data Center, who are developing tools like Earth Access, which is a Python tool used to make the access of this cloud data a little bit easier using things like Python. So this is just part of a little taste of the effort that is involved with this, and something that is always evolving. Part of the documentation that we have is to guide users through what it means to run things in the cloud. And part of that is talking about things that make us a little bit uncomfortable, like cost. Unfortunately, the way that the cloud is structured, sometimes if you wish to implement it on your own, does require a bit of training from the folks at AWS. Personally, I have an AWS Cloud Architect certification, which helped me to understand basically which different services are placed at different points in the cloud and the public internet, and what is the best way to come up with a cost model for a particular solution. Now, that means that us at NASA Earth Data and at JESDISC are not going to help consult you with how to set up your project to make it the most cost efficient. Instead, we're just going to help guide you through what we currently use, typical setups, and typical areas that some of those costs might be incurred. And so we've created documentation and diagrams like this one here, which attempts to outline the different services that are provided by the Earth Data Cloud, such as OpenApp and HTTPS. You can see that they're inside the cloud, they pull from AWS, and they go through the public internet to the public user for free. But you can also see that if a user wishes to run a Jupyter notebook, access the data from S3 buckets, which is where the data is stored in the cloud, and they want to run that next to the data in the cloud, you will see that it does cost money. And if they wish to create a service, which some groups are definitely interested in doing, that also requires some cost. So again, we're not really providing any direct dollar figures here. But whenever we do these workshops with groups like OpenScapes, we share these findings when we can. And so this is something that we really wanted to capture when I was at the ESIP conference just a few weeks ago. And at that ESIP conference, we wanted to address the different barriers involved with this. We already know what the cloud can do to help make our analysis more efficient, maybe more cost effective if you weren't so focused on developing hardware, for example. And so we wanted to capture that all in a poster. And so I just wanted to share that poster here and a few of the different text boxes that were from that poster. Alexis Hunzinger, who's actually my coworker on the user needs team, is here in the chat. She also helped create this resource. And so we sent out a survey, and we asked our various user working group members and OpenScapes champions, what are some of the issues that they're currently running into in implementing these cloud resources on their own without having to use groups like OpenScapes and 2I2C. And so we've captured really topical things and things that are really administrative almost, including cost estimation and justification. Right now, we're still getting a lot of uncertainty. How much am I able to scale things up without it accidentally charging my credit card way more than I intended? What are best practices? And also, how can we just convince our institution to implement these things instead of just doing the same thing that they've always done? Knowing when to use the cloud is part of that. Some workflows use old software. Maybe they use things like GDAL or for example, to use, or not even GDAL, older tools that are a little bit less interoperable and cloud friendly. Is that worth putting into the cloud? Is it worth that they even have to learn things like Python and R to be able to interact with cloud computing? This is all part of interoperability. And this is really something that we're constantly trying to think about how to address this. And so we've also captured things like, well, how do I already know when to use the cloud, but how do I make it more optimized for cost management? And finally, people are exploring different cloud platforms, such as Google Earth Engine or Azure. So this is something that I want to invite feedback on continuously using a group and a time slot like this. So some goals that I have for this committee as the new chair, I realize I'm actually kind of ending a little bit early here, so I'll go ahead and open up the a little bit of a discussion after this. I've created these 3 goals that I wish to implement. The first is to make sure that the space is not just showing off new technologies, maybe showing things that are kind of up and coming and still kind of are in a testing phase. I want this to be a space for user feedback using what we already have, and maybe have it be an opportunity for people to learn about new resources, but also give feedback on those services. And so you'll notice that as we have these webinars through the rest of the year, I'll usually have speakers that aren't necessarily just super engineering forward. I want to make sure that they have their services at a level that everyone can understand it and take something away from this. The second is I want to discuss new workflows as well as new technologies. I know that we all want to talk about the next best thing that comes out, but making it involved in your analysis is just as important and is part of that interoperability pillar in this community. That is something that we're not just thinking about constantly at JESDISC, but I also want to bring here, and was certainly reflected in a few of the in-person interactions I had at the ESIP conference. And then finally, I want to take this culture of collaboration and open science and really share that using this community. So I don't necessarily want to make it so that we're just doing these webinars here and you can just revisit the recording and maybe you learn something new. I want to use things like the ESIP meetings to better foster some of the things that we can learn here. And so I know that Dave Blodgett, the previous chair, was able to do that at the previous ESIP conference, where he had lightning sessions with various data providers and users. And I want to continue that sort of thing going forward. And finally, I just wanted to share my email address. If you do want to present, if you have any feedback, go ahead and just drop me a line. And so with that being said, I'm pretty much wrapped up here. I just want to give a few acknowledgments here. I want to thank Dave Blodgett, who's the former IT&I chair. I had a chance to meet him in Asheville a few weeks ago, and he was able to lay out his expectations going forward, and so I was really appreciative to that. I'd also like to thank Sharif Islam, who is the ESIP Community Fellow, for setting up this meeting. And then also I want to thank Dr. Brianna Pagan, who is working at our JESDISC right now, and she's the one who inspired me to run. And then finally, I want to thank Alexis Hunzinger, who is here, and Dr. Benita Casey, who is also our user needs team lead. Without you, I wouldn't have been in this position in the first place, so I want to thank you very much. And with that, I will go ahead and open it up for any questions. Again, I see we're still a little bit early, but I would rather talk to you than just be the only one talking. So thank you very much, everyone, if you need to leave. But does anybody have any questions?
And while folks are thinking of their questions, this is Megan Orlando from ESIP. I just want to say thank you to Chris for stepping into this role and for wanting to use this as a really productive and positive space and not just a watch-only kind of engagement space. So thank you for that. And I did enable unmuting if anybody wants to speak up or put your questions in the chat.
Yeah, thank you very much, Megan. I see a question from Leslie here. Do all DACs have a user needs team? Seems like a great model. That's actually a good question. I think there's a lot of teams that do a lot of that user engagement, whether it be just maybe a few people with the help desk or the Earth Data Forum. But typically, are they called user needs? Is it part of kind of their framework? I'm not entirely sure. I see another hand raised. Oh, I see Alexis raised her hand.
Yeah, that's a really good question, Leslie. I think, and we only know this because we got to be part of that community that was built by OpenScapes that connected all of these folks that are in similar enough roles at the different DACs. Yeah, so like Chris said, I think that they might have different names like user services, user needs. We all have vastly different titles, but we all do roughly the same thing. So yeah, I would love for some more uniformity to be there, but it is nice to have the variety.
Okay, well, I think if no one else has any questions, a few closing items. I'm going to share this slide deck in the chat before I forget. So let me go ahead and post that in the chat now. Oh, and yes, Leslie, I see. We don't necessarily prioritize different users. We try to encapsulate the difficulty of a particular service in various tiers. And so right now, an effort that we're working on is using things like Earth Access to make searching for data using Python and accessing it a little easier. But we also include methods for interacting with the APIs themselves if a user desires to do so. So we don't really prioritize someone who is maybe a little more savvy with reading API documentation versus someone who is a little bit newer to Python. We try to open that up as much as we can.
This is Benita. If I may add more into it. So yeah, I mean, we do not necessarily really prioritize the users, but in terms of providing the resources for the users, like we do have different sort of resources and services for different, level of expertise of the user. So if that answers your question. And we try to develop resources to provide guidance on those different variety of services that we provide.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And does anyone have any other closing remark? Oh, I see. Here's another question from Ellen. Our center is starting a similar technical services group. Do you have advice or lessons learned for getting this off the ground? I'll also let Benita and Alexis speak on this if they have anything to add. But I would say that the biggest thing is to just be as transparent as possible and to try to make it so that when you're working on different documentation, you utilize resources like GitHub. I know that these tools have a bit of a learning curve, but what it's allowed is for us to be able to collect feedback on a particular, let's say if a how-to has an issue, and it's allowed us to be able to fix it more efficiently and with a little bit more transparency versus just keeping the documentation all kind of on a single server. We have been attempting to make those things as open as possible, even with getting those resources on things like Zenodo as well. Benita or Alexis, I don't know if you have anything else to add.
Yeah, just to add to that, I was actually going to type that in the message. But yes, I mean, you covered most of it. And just making sure like we take our, inquiries from our users seriously. we have help desk, and whenever we get any questions and we see that through that question some of the services or the resources for the users who provide needs improvement, then we do that on regular basis, and just make sure our users have what they need, and make sure it's smooth and technically also in terms of it's really sound and and reproducible. So and also on regular basis we do collect feedback from our users from various sources. For example, ACSI survey is one of them. We do have we do perform those surveys annually, and we also have user working group who constantly and provides feedback to us, and we take that feedback seriously as well.
Thank you. And then Leslie also asked, what is our organization's policy on using GitHub? So what we have to do is we have to submit a few different forms if we wish to create an actual repository underneath the NASA organization. So in GitHub, you can have different organizations with various repositories under that. And so this Justice repository is underneath that organization. And as a result, if you wish to be added as a kind of a maintainer, you do have to be part of the organization. You do have to be verified. However, you can use things like forking to collaborate and contribute notebooks or suggestions to fix or change notebooks if you are not a part of the organization. And that's exactly how the folk from the collaboration that we had from the other DAC to be able to get one of their notebooks in there was done. And that was really great. They were able to fork it, open up a pull request. We were able to go through the whole approval process without them having to go through a whole process. So I encourage everyone to be able to do that. Okay. Do we have any, Megan or Sharif, do you have any other remarks before we close for today?
Not from my side, just thank you very much, and we look forward to the next installment.
Okay,
Thank
great.
you, Chris.
Yep, thank you. And I'm happy to announce that we did just get an RSVP for our next speaker. And so I will go ahead and collect a title and an abstract for that as soon as I can. And I hope to see you all there next time. And I'm really excited to have met you all today.
And
Thank you
Chris,
very much.
I just jarred my memory and remembered that I should mention the ESIP meeting highlights webinar on August 19th. That's a Monday from 2 to 3:30 p.m. Eastern time. You can check the community calendar on the ESIP website to find out how to register for that, but it'll be a really great opportunity to hear fast-paced report outs on what happened at the ESIP meeting, and that's a nice teaser for the full-length recordings that will be on the ESIP YouTube channel around that time.
Yes, thank you. I will actually be sharing a slide on behalf of the IT&I Committee at that, and then I'll also be sharing a slide on behalf of OpenScapes. So I will certainly be there.
Awesome, and we welcome anyone else. Thanks again.
Okay, thank you, everyone. I'll go ahead and stop the recording.